There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, lovely people. This is Sean of Sean Breeze Books. Back in January of 2025, the Europe-based writer Vesna Main, she describes herself very interestingly as a writer of the world, was my mystery guest. And we had such a wonderful and lengthy conversation that I couldn't fit everything into the mystery guest format in my Friday reads sometime in January. And so I've saved it, and here is the full chat. I'll put a timestamp at the bottom as I'm talking here about where the new material starts. And if you just want to see the new stuff where she recommends books and talks about a bunch of other lovely literary stuff, you can go directly there. But I would invite and encourage you to watch the whole darn conversation from beginning to end. It was a very special, memorable, literary conversation. Please enjoy. This week's mystery guest is the writer Vesna Main, author most recently of the 2024 novel or novella, Waiting for a Party, joining us from London today. Vesna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You didn't want me to identify you as a British writer or a Croatian British writer. You are a writer of the world.
I'm a citizen of the world.
You're a
And
citizen of the world.
I have never felt anything. It says on Google that I'm a Croatian writer. And I think it was one early reviewer of my collection of short stories who simply just didn't know what to say. And so she looked me up and said, born in Zagreb, Croatia. And so Croatian writer. And I've been trying to get rid of it on Google, but you need all sorts of identifications on Google. And I just couldn't do it. And it's been following me. And I have never felt, when I lived in Zagreb, I did my first degree there and came to do postgraduate work in England. And then I lived in Nigeria where I was teaching, and now I mostly live in France. And I've never felt anything. I must say that since Brexit, which to somebody who, although I have a British passport, but I always felt foreign, just as I felt foreign in Zagreb, where I was born. Since Brexit, I do feel European. I feel European. I'm a graduate of comparative literature. And for me, I chose that because, as my first degree, because I believed in this idea of literature passionately that goes across borders.
Wonderful.
But at the same time, there is the idea, I don't know if you've come across, which I think is so wonderful. It comes from a guy called Ernest Robert Curtius, a German scholar, and it's the idea of the European cultural circle. And it's the beginning with the Bible and with Homer, because in a way, everything, all our stories, everything comes from there in European art and in European literature. And, somehow in that sense, I feel European.
Well, oh my goodness, this is going to be a really interesting chat. Why don't we start by tell us about Waiting for a Party? I have to say that when I learned it was about a 92-year-old woman discovering her sexuality as a senior person, that is so much the concept of that, the theme of that, the topic is so much up my street that I can't wait to read it. Tell us more about it.
Well, let me tell you how it started. A few years ago, there was a letter in The Guardian, which is one of the national broadsheets here in Britain. And there was a woman in her 90s writing in saying that she was so distraught because her lover of the past 20 years, a man a few years younger than her, so in his mid to late 80s, had just told her that he has found somebody else. And she said what upset her was not so much that he had left her, but that she cared. She felt that at 92, she shouldn't care. So what? It's all past her. But she did care. And the wonderful thing was that readers wrote in and saying, of course, everyone needs love and everyone needs physical intimacy, regardless of what sort of age they are. So that moved me very much, stayed with me. I didn't think of writing anything about it. But somehow, sometimes something triggers something in your mind and it kind of stays with you and kind of persecutes you almost until you address it. And so I started writing a story about her, and lots of things emerged. And the way I write, the character kind of speaks to me, and it's nothing mystical when I say that. It is simply that you live the character, you live the book, you try to live as a writer. So whatever you are doing, and by the way, I don't like to. I never use the word inspiration. I sit down every morning and I write, and things happen or they don't happen, or you have pages on the screen, but they're no good and so on. But whatever you are doing, I like swimming. I swim every day when I'm in London. And while I'm swimming, because it's mechanical, it's not a big pool, it's a private pool. So it's a sort of like a goldfish in the bowl, just swimming up and down, up and down. And so my mind is free to think. And I've had so many ideas there, and I panic then that I will lose them. So I always have my phone and I kind of jot down a few notes because I've learned so many times that you have an idea and you think, oh yes, I'll keep it, I'll fix it in my mind. But you don't, because another one comes and the previous one's gone into ether. That's it, gone. So I write it down, I jot something down, just one or two words. So eventually I had loads of material about, this woman. And I even gave her a name, which is kind of quite rare for me, first name and the second name. But that's never a problem. I'm not particularly interested actually in telling a story, in the plot and so on. I'm very much interested in the form. Sometimes I like to think of, there is a first sentence in Beckett's Murphy, and I love Beckett. I love absolutely everything he's written, which says, the sun, comma, having no alternative, comma, shone on nothing new. I mean, reference to the Bible and so on. But there is nothing new under the sun. We have all the stories. All the stories have been told already. So what interests me is the form. And I think you need new forms for our times of uncertainties, of questioning everything and so on, rather than giving answers and so on. So the problem was how to put that material into something. And I tried and I tried. And with several of my books, I've written complete texts of 60, 70, 80,000 words, even 100,000 words, and I abandoned it. One of my previous books, Good Day, which is completely written in dialogue, I had two complete versions. I even had them printed out as books on one of those free publishing sites, just so that I could look at them and see what I can do with them. And I abandoned both. The final version had nothing to do with it. The characters were there, but the form was different. And it is something to do with the voice that I hear in my head. You just know whether it's right. There's an Irish writer, Claire Keegan, and in one of her stories, one character says that they are looking for a scent of the story. It's something like that. You just know whether the voice is right. So that's the long part of writing any of my texts. This voice.
So your protagonist is the 92-year-old Claire Meadows.
Yes.
Tell us about the scent of Claire Meadows.
So what happened as I was trying to write it, it just turned out that it was Sunday morning, and she was lying in bed. She's woken up, she's 92, and she remembered another Sunday morning 30 years earlier. So when she was 62. And that Sunday morning, she had woken up after one night stand. She was widowed by that time for 30 years. She's a pianist. She used to teach piano. And she went to a concert the night before with a couple of friends who more or less forced her that she should go and join them at a party. She felt, her life is okay. She's got everything. and no need to meet other people and so on. Eventually, she did go. She met a man there and he gave her a lift. And the book actually opens with that memory. She's sitting in the car and she doesn't know. He has gone out of his way to give her a lift. He more or less insisted that he would give her a lift. She's sitting in the car, they're very close to her house, and she's worried. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Should she invite him in? What if he thinks she's presumptuous? Or should she wait for him to say something? What if he doesn't switch off the engine? What he just say, here you are, opens the door and that's it. And she's just completely lost. She feels like a teenager. She doesn't know how, I'm 62, I should know how to deal with this. She doesn't. Anyway, they do have one night stand in the car and she has an orgasm. She doesn't remember ever having an orgasm with her husband. He was a successful man, professionally very successful, 20 years older. She was 20 when she met him, suddenly orphaned. Both parents died. She was completely lost. She didn't know what to do. And for various reasons, it suited him, to marry somebody like that. And she kind of fell into it, into this marriage. And she remembers all that, but she never had an orgasm because she never expressed sexual desire. She was never asked to do, and so on. And so she lies in bed remembering that, and then remembering various other things. Memory is never linear. And it made me think later, after I've written the book, as I said, I'm just led by that scent, by that voice. But after I've written the novel, and it is 65,000 words, so it's respectable for a novel. It just seems very, very short. It's very, it's printed with lots of words on a page. But there is this surge of memories. And through those memories, you realize that it's actually a story of growing up. That in her 60s, after that orgasm, she has various affairs then. And some very unsuccessful, but she learns what she wants. She learns what she needs. And she learns so many other things about her. She looks back on her marriage. She learns things there. How he was always telling the story of their life, how they met, and so on. In a way, it is a classical Bildungsroman, the story of growing up. But it is through memory. And since I've written it, I've realized that there are no stories about all the women, let alone about all the women who have sexual desires. Because at the end, by the way, the novel starts with the word yes, which is Molly Bloom's yes, the eternal feminine yes. And it ends with yes. And I've kind of borrowed that to give her that. I like that yes from Molly Bloom, who's also lying in bed and thinking about her lover. But Claire Meadows is also a very positive character, being 92. She is positive. She is lucky to be 92. She has got reasonable, financially, she's okay. She doesn't have to worry about it. And if you are lucky not to be ill, she's physically and mentally fit. It's the best time of your age. And since I've written the book, I've become so aware not only how few books, how few films there are about all the people, particularly women. Women in particular are invisible, all the women. Somehow, perhaps it is to do something with that old belief, which obviously, is absolutely ridiculous. Biology is our destiny. So that once you are into menopause and so on, you are just invisible. You have served your purpose. You cannot have children anymore. As a biological entity, you are useless. And interestingly enough, Claire Meadows, who hasn't had children, she gets a son. She becomes mother in her 60s. Now, I won't say
Let the reader
how
discover
that
how that
happens.
goes. Yeah.
How that happens. So, in a way, she goes against this. Biology's destiny. Once you have had your menopause, you are finished. You're just a waste of space because you can't contribute. We are all cells contributing, to survival of the species. You can't do that anymore. And so I've become aware of this whole idea of old age representation in our society, which is not the same everywhere in the East. I think maturity counts for something. And particularly that matters for women. Since looking into it, I came across all sorts of interesting things. Simone Signoret saying how about Yves Montand, with reference to him, how men live and then they die. Women age. Men don't age, they just die. They are okay at any age. Or Simone de Beauvoir, more than 50 years ago, writing a book about old age, La Vieillesse, in which she says the treatment of old people in our society is a political issue. We need to do something about it. Long ago, she wrote that. Old age is not necessarily the age of decline, mental and physical. If you are lucky, and I acknowledge obviously lots of people are not lucky. If you are lucky to be fit physically and retain your mental capacities, and you have reasonably comfortable life, you don't need to be rich, but if you have a reasonably comfortable life, so you have your house, your heating, you have access to some cultural things, to things that stimulate you, you are extremely lucky. And I think we should celebrate that. And there have been so few films, so few books. I mean, I could mention a few, but very, very few that have celebrated that. Living in France for most of the year, I'm kind of aware that in France there have been quite a few women, notably recently Laura Adler, a journalist, who have particularly written about old age and at the time of their lives. Annie Ernaux, the Nobel Prize winner as well, has spoken about it, about the need to recognize old age.
I read a lot of literature about older women, and I can't think of one that addresses, at least as directly, the sexuality of older women. The only one that comes to mind, and I haven't read it yet, I wonder if you have, is Cat Brushing by Jane Campbell.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I was going to mention it.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
she
yeah.
was 80 when she published that book. It's a collection
Yeah.
of short stories,
Yes.
and they're lovely. And cat brushing is particularly my favorite. One of the stories is called Cat Brushing.
Yeah.
But absolutely, she is aware of the need for physical intimacy and so on. I mean, her characters. And yes, that's the one that, absolutely I would mention. Because every other one that I could mention, Penelope Lively or Doris Lessing, the old women may fancy younger men usually, but there is nothing physical. And the only one that has physical stuff, I would say, is the wonderful book by Angela Carter, Wise Children.
Oh,
They are in their 80s, the twins, the wonderful twins who in their 80s they have sex and quite, quite very, very lively sex actually. And so on, with a man who is 100. The book is more magic realism. You really suspend your belief. It's absolutely wonderful. It's one of my favorites. The Chance sisters, the twins, who are so feisty. But I don't like to say I write realist books. I don't. But, it's plausible what's going on with Claire Meadows in her life. It's plausible. And she still has a vibrator. And some of her memories make her reach for her vibrator.
wow, that's wonderful. I
So
love that so
I
much.
think it's very positive. And she has plans. She remembers the past. She lives in the present, but she has plans for the future. Her son and his husband, they pencil in, various things that they're going to do, the travel and so on. But you see, the interesting thing for me is that I have discovered these things in my book after I've written it. I had no idea about any of it before. And I don't write with a message. I don't write with any kind of agenda. All that interests me is the form. And so here it was the memory, and the memory that allows you to think of the whole. I'm sort of shaky on philosophy, but I've come across something in Hegel saying about how through memory, and you need the whole to understand things. And I think perhaps there is something in my novel about it. I mean, of course, the real whole can only be when you are dead.
Absolutely.
And actually, there's a novel which I love, Fitzcarraldo, one of the independent publishers
Yes.
here. One of their novels that they've published. There's a character who is actually telling her life from after her death. Mine is not doing that, but I think that's the only way that you can see the whole, that you can say, I was happy, right? When you can have it all, nothing else can happen.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of vibrators, I am sitting here vibrating. The more you talk about waiting for a party, it sounds like such a Sean book. I can't wait to read it and have you come back for an even longer chat. Vesna, what are you working on now?
Right. I'm writing a novel, and I've got two drafts around 70,000 words. I may be shorter when I finish, it's called Supper with Lolita. And it's partly triggered by some of the readings that I've heard in the media, particularly in France, with interpretations of Nabokov's Lolita, which I found rather disturbing.
Mm.
And so, for example, there was a novelist whose work I like very much, and she wrote a novel about abuse that she suffered as a child for years, sexual abuse at the hands of her stepfather.
Mhm.
He was later jailed and so on. And in an interview on the French radio, she said how it was the story of Lolita and compared it to that. And I found that upsetting because I think it's such a wonderful novel. And, in moral terms, it nowhere is it, suggesting that pedophilia is okay, that you can drug young nymphets and sleep with them and so on. Because it's so artful, it's so self-conscious as a novel. Plus, it has this foreword around whereby the novel is presented as a document that somebody wrote, Humbert, while he was in prison. And the writer of the foreword, who I think is his lawyer, actually condemns all of that. So there is just no way that one can say that Nabokov is morally responsible for pedophilia or anything. And there have been several voices like that. And, it upset me. And so in this novel, there is a group of writers in a restaurant, and they're talking, they're talking about their own childhoods and experiences. The occasion is they've been invited after a book launch by one of them. And that is a woman who actually has just written a novel, their friend, in which all the pages are completely empty. 400 pages with nothing in it. We discover why that is so. But she's also somebody who, and there is a little bit of me in her in that sense. I hope not much, because something else happens to her, quite terrible. So that she's on the way to Zurich, actually, to Dignitas the next day. But she's written this novel because she always wanted to write something which no one else has written. Something whereby, if you go on Amazon or somewhere else, that they couldn't say people who bought this novel also bought this, and that, because this is so unique. This is unique. and no one else, you can't, if you have bought this, there is nothing else to buy, right? And so she wrote this novel with 400 pages completely empty. And there is perhaps a little bit of emperor's new clothes there, because none of her friends dare say anything. They don't say, hang on, what's going on here? But we do hear two other voices who are saying, look, this is the best. This is her best novel because all the stories of the world are here, all and none. It's up to the reader. And also, it's not a failure because ultimately, at least I think like that, or everything we do is a failure because what you have in your head is much superior to what you can put on the page. You can never be happy, but there comes a time when you want to move on, but it's always a failure. So if you write something like this, where it's just completely blank pages, and it's only up to the reader to imagine, and the writer is another reader to imagine this best novel that they see and hear in their head, that's just wonderful. You can't fail. Also, I think artificial intelligence can beat that. It can't write in the style of that. 400 empty pages. Hmm? So, there is a little bit of that in there. And then there is also this discussion about Lolita, which is kind of interspersed with stories from abuse in childhood, such as one writer talks about her mother not speaking to her for months on end and how she coped about it. And yet she understands her mother. She never felt bad about her mother. She understands why, as a woman, what it was for her mother, how difficult it was for her mother to have a daughter who wasn't what she expected. Because ultimately, every child is a disappointment, no matter how much we love them. They're always a disappointment. They're not what we wanted them to be. Just like every book is a disappointment.
Well,
It's
I was
not
just
that
going to make that
ideal.
connection. Yes.
Yes.
You talked a minute ago about failure, and I wonder about every work of literature when it finds the right reader. It's not a failure. There is a connection there where the reader completes the book and it resonates so deeply. And so I love all of that energy in what you're currently working on that's kind of delving into some of that, the co-creation of a work of literature when it finds the right readers.
I fully agree with that. But, it's a failure for the writer because the reader doesn't know what you have in your head. That ideal. It's always elusive. I know, I hear it. I'm in the swimming pool. I hear it. And then I write it down. No, it's not. And then I hear another one. Many years ago, I read John Fowles's Magus. And it's a little bit like that. This guy goes to teach English on a Greek island, and young guy, and strange things happen to him, and he doesn't know what's going on. It's very awkward. And then he's offered an explanation, and he says, "Oh, how I didn't think of that. Of course, it's so obvious. Everything falls into place." And you, as a reader, think, "Of course, that's so obvious. It makes sense." And then you turn the page. He goes around the corner on the island. Nah, it doesn't make sense. And another explanation is offered, and another, and another. And you always think, of course, I was so stupid before to believe the previous one. This one is the right one. But of course, none of them are. And in the end, he's just frozen. The character is frozen in the kind of eternal present. And it's something like that with this elusive text that you are constantly trying to write, but it's never there. So the reader doesn't know that, but it's there. It's there in my head. And it just, it will always be there. On the other hand, it's good to be a failure. You try again, you fail better, as Becker tells us. You fail better. Otherwise, if you wrote a perfect novel, or we thought we have written a perfect, we were convinced we have, that would be it. just as in the novel I'm writing now, the characters think, well, there's two who on the side who are not named who talk about this novel of 470 pages. They said this is the death of the novel. Where do you go from here? All the stories are here. So what do we do now? That's it. Everything's been said.
So tell us what you've been reading recently that you'd like to recommend.
The book I've just finished is by László Krasznahorkai, who is one of my favorite contemporary writers. And it's a novel called Herscht 0W769. Florian Herscht is the name of the main character. It's over 400 pages, all one paragraph and one sentence.
Wow.
And it's not a gimmick. There is a very good reason for it being one sentence. And it is to do with a particular issue in physics about matter and antimatter and time, and about not representing time as a kind of linear, but more as a continuous. So this one sentence is connected to that. At least that's how I understand it. And it is spellbinding about what happens. A fictional German character with a Nazi gang and a kind of village idiot protagonist and so on. It's absolutely wonderful. But then I find all of his books most wonderful.
You pronounce his name perfectly correctly, and I'm not going to even try, but I have not read him. Do you think this would be a good place to start with his work, or if not, where should I start?
Oh, I don't know.
Do his works become increasingly more complex, or are they all kind of the
No,
same?
no, I don't think so. They're different. There is one which is perhaps more straightforward, and I've forgotten the exact name, but it's Baron something. Baron,
Okay.
and I've forgotten the name of the Baron, W something, which is the kind of funny story about this guy who was in exile, I think in America or somewhere, where he made lots of money. And he's returning to Hungary or the Central European country. There is all this hypocrisy, and because they all think this rich guy is coming back and we'll all benefit from it. But of course he isn't. He hasn't got a penny. And so it's satirical comedy and perhaps more straightforward than his others.
Okay.
But I would
That
recommend
might be a
at least
good place to get
one.
started.
Yeah. But another recommendation is a writer who I think is sadly not sufficiently well known in this country, who I think is absolutely wonderful, and that's Gabriel Josipovici. Is one of my absolute favorites.
Oh, yes, I have read one of his novellas, and I enjoyed it. Thought a lot of it went over my head. Planned to reread it, but yes, I agree with you.
My absolute favorite is one of his older novels called Mupak, which is about these two guys walking and talking, which is the most wonderful activity. And they're talking about a novel that one of them is writing. And then at the end, you realize something very, very important. The one talking about his book reveals to the other. I won't say that now. Why? But to me, it is also a metaphor for this elusive text that we always have in our head. And perhaps the best text that we could write would be the one that you never write or leave blank pages, because then it would be perfect.
Resonates profoundly what you were telling us about your current
Yeah,
writing.
and I have just read his latest book, which has got both a fictional section on one side, and on the other side, it's got a non-fictional part, which is one is called Partita, which is a story of a man running away from something. And the structure is based, from what I understand, on Bach's partitas. And then on the other side, there is a non-fictional piece about Kafka in Zirau, which is a German village where Kafka's sister had a farm and he went to stay for a couple of months with her. And it's about that. and it's very much based on Kafka's aphorisms and so on, but it's absolutely wonderful. Or another one that Josipovic published just before this one is 100 Days, which is a wonderful non-fictional book about 100 days during the COVID lockdown. And his diary, which is absolutely wonderful. He's a very learned critic as well, and very, very erudite. And so it's absolutely wonderful to read him and to come across things that you look up and follow and so on. And for me, life is about learning. And particularly in older age, when you feel more free, when, you know, children have gone or you don't have to have them anymore, no expectations, and you hopefully you're retired, you have some income and so on, and you can just focus on real things that matter and so on. I'm just reminded of something in a book by a French writer called Christian Bobin, who has two characters, and one says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm learning." And the other one says, "What are you learning?" He says, "I'm learning," because it's learning that matters, not some end, you know, of some degree or whatever. It's learning about yourself and about the world and so on. In English, Anna Burns, who's a Booker winner.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I love Milkman so much.
I had the good fortune to share writing with Anna when she was writing Milkman. And it was absolutely wonderful. We would, every fortnight, we would send each other our work in progress and read and share. And since Booker, she's been very busy, and I miss that. And she lives in Northern Ireland now. But I did see her recently. I think she's most wonderful. And I was over the moon when she got Booker for that.
Absolutely.
Because it's very different from mainstream in England. And another writer I would definitely recommend, she has just won the Goldsmiths Prize, and that's Rachel Cusk and her book Parade.
Technically
I
Canadian.
love her work. She was born in Canada. She lives in Paris now. Apparently she got fed up with Brexit and she's moved to Paris. And I've seen her on French television. They have a most wonderful program called La Grande Librairie, where writers are invited every week, every Wednesday. And there is often some theme. He invites writers who have a book about that or something. And it's most wonderful because it's not a critical program whereby, oh, this is good, this is bad, so on, which in a way sometimes one misses that. But it is them talking about their work, how they work, what matters. And the passion just oozes. I watch it on television and it just oozes through the screen. The passion
just like what's happening now, right now with you.
Oh, thank you. Literature is just so, so important to me. It's just everything. I think my nearest and dearest may not like to hear that, but it's just everything. And it never disappoints.
You have what? One short story collection, at least one, maybe more.
I have one short story collection. I have lots of stories in different journals all around. I've just had one published in a wonderful magazine. I don't know if you're familiar. They're absolutely wonderfully edited and curated, called Bombay Literary Magazine.
Maybe. Not overly familiar.
Look them up. They're online. And they also have a Substack called Crow and Colophon. And they are wonderful. And just having email exchange with the editors, Neil Menon, who is the editor-in-chief, or even others I've had exchanges with, it's just such a pleasure. You know, I think so much. They all seem to just know everything, and references from mathematics to physics to literature, philosophy. And it's just wonderful. And I had a short story published there, which is a short story called Zip, which is about a man having this erotic fantasy as he remembers pulling a zip up on his wife's ship-wreck. And he imagines he's somebody else. He's this character in a film which probably doesn't exist, a film. A little bit like last year in Marienbad, that kind of character, and so on. It was published in December.
Oh,
If you
great.
look at Bombay Literary Magazine, they have most wonderful stories. Yeah. They published another one of mine a year earlier. And
Great.
perhaps another story that I would recommend if you wanted to have a look is a story which was inspired by French photographer Eugène Atget, and it is in the London magazine, and it is called A Large Coach with an Old Man Inside. And it's based on a photograph that Berenice Abbott, the American photographer, took of Atget a few weeks before he died. And it's the most striking photograph because he's wearing this huge coat. And you just see the coat. There is this little head and a hand. That's all. There is just the coat. And it's most wonderful. Yeah, so I tried to write a novel about him, but it didn't work. I've got it, but
Wow.
he's wonderful.
We were talking about Canada a moment ago. Are you familiar with, do you like the short stories of Mavis Gallant?
Yes, of course. And she was Paris-based.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she was Paris-based. I know her Paris stories. Absolutely. Yes. And she wrote loads. I think I only read one volume, which is quite a thick one.
I read her collected stories, so yeah, amazing. And I actually had a lovely moment with her in an autograph line in Toronto in the 1990s that I shall never forget.
Oh, really? Yes, yeah. But talking of short stories and North Americans, Lydia Davis is just superb. I mean, that in a class of her.
Yeah, I haven't read very many of them, but just based on those few, I would agree. Yes.
I once there was a Zoom meeting and she was there. And I asked her whether she feels, I said, I see her as a European writer. And she said, no, I'm American, which was lovely to say. But because of her French connection, she lived in Paris and translator of Proust and Blanchon and so on. And I always feel she is a European writer. And yeah, she's somebody I just always really admire.
She's one of those citizen of the world writers, like somebody else I am just meeting for the first time.
Yes, and she said how sadly, I remember in that when she answered me, she said how sadly she doesn't think she'll ever go to Europe again because she has promised herself not to fly. She's very environmentally conscious, and I believe she's involved in various environmental projects in the community where she lives.
You've been very generous with your time. You have mesmerized me, Vesna Main. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I look forward is an understatement. I can't wait to get to waiting for a party and talking to you at more length about that. But this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sean.